Georgia at Texas. It's an SEC matchup in Austin, Texas. The Bulldogs will go on the road. Texas favored by 3.5. Over under set at 54.5. Texas, of course, coming off the big rivalry win against Oklahoma. Georgia coming off what looked like a dominant victory for a decent portion of the game, and then kind of decided to let Mississippi State jump back in that football game and had some, I don't know, I guess you'd say breaks on defense that allowed Mississippi State to hit some big plays at the end of that football game. I fully agree with Texas being favored here, especially with this game being played in Austin. I think this game comes down to some pretty simple football stuff. It's going to be lines of scrimmage. Right now, I think Texas has the clear advantage on the line of scrimmage against Georgia in this football game. And honestly, as we kind of break this game down further into the week, we're going to do it on our Tuesday live show. So come join us live on Tuesday evening. But I think Texas has got the advantage in a lot of areas in this football game. I think Georgia, the defense has not played their best football yet. And I think this is probably one of those opportunities where Kirby Smart gets this defense ready to play in this football game. The over-under set at 54.5, so you can kind of do the math in your head there. Vegas isn't expecting necessarily a barn burner back and forth, but I kind of disagree with that. I think there's going to be a pretty good bit of scoring in this football game. I'm considering the over already. Look, this Texas defense they're not tested. They're not battle tested yet. That was our biggest question about Texas going into the season. It wasn't offensively with their offensive mastermind as head coach, right? It was defensively. Can Texas take some of the steps in the right direction defensively to move closer to winning a championship, and in this case, an SEC championship? And that defense is still not exactly tested. One of the biggest areas that we talked about Texas's defense and not being tested was some of the newer guys that are on the defensive line. We watched a couple of first-round talents leave off that defensive line last year in the middle, go to the NFL. They were absolutely unbelievable at stopping the run last season, average giving up 75 yards a game on the ground. Those guys are gone, and we haven't seen anybody be able to test the defensive line of Texas. And unfortunately, I'm not so sure that Georgia is the team that's going to be able to test that. Georgia's not much of a run team at this point. And it seems like Georgia has kind of accepted that thought process as Georgia threw the ball 50 times against Mississippi State. Now, I don't know exactly what to make of that. I don't think Georgia's ever going to just give up on the run necessarily. But it's not the best running back room that we've seen for Georgia. The offensive line has been shuffled around the last couple of weeks. Tate Ratledge, there's been rumors he's coming back. What do you think about this football game? I think Georgia needs to get healthy and get healthy really quick if they're going to stand a chance in this game in Austin.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the lines of scrimmage, right? Georgia is obviously depleted along the offensive line. I don't know if Jared Wilson comes back and plays in this game. Drew Bobo's filled in his spot pretty well. I think he's played okay. Tate Ratledge not going to be able to go in this game, for sure. I think we're looking at him maybe in like a late November sort of comeback there. Sometime in November is probably the timeline for him to come back, and he's potentially the best interior offensive lineman in college football. I'd have him and Tyler Booker in there for that, but yeah. Nonetheless, weak on the offensive line. On the defensive line for Georgia, they did get some pieces back. Xavier McLeod played in the last game. I believe Warren Brinson is back, if I'm not mistaken.
Michael
Williams is back. Still without Jordan Hall in the interior of that defensive line, but they're healthier than they've been probably all season, really, for the most part. Maybe outside of the Clemson game. So that's good for Georgia. Even with them coming back on the defensive line, I do think that Texas's offensive line has a clear advantage here. This is a unit that is performing at a Joe Moore Award type of level here. I think that they are finalists for that at this point in the season. So I give them the edge there. Georgia's offensive line against Texas's defensive line, I feel pretty good about what Texas has coming off the edges. The interior of the defensive line has played better than I expected them to play
Yep.
after they lose some pieces to the NFL there. But I do think that if nothing, this may be a wash for both teams along that side of the football. Maybe I lean Georgia a little bit, but they got to play a clean game. Make no doubts about it. Georgia's wide receiver room, which is somewhat depleted now, with two wide receivers being kicked off the team, two of their biggest wide receivers being kicked off the team. No huge targets there on the outside now for Georgia against a Texas secondary that has kind of been revamped. That unit has not been tested yet. That there is
Yep.
still a big question mark on the secondary for Texas. I got to give the edge to Georgia at wide receiver. I think that Arian Smith is really coming on. He's put together two or maybe even three, back to back or back to back to back weeks of 100+ yards receiving. That is really impressive for a Georgia team to do, for any player on a Georgia team to do. Dylan Bell, he goes down in the Clemson game, kind of has been working his way back from injury. It looks like he's back in good form. I think that he'll have a pretty good game this week. Dominic Lovett has been kind of MIA, really, considering we expected him to be the leading receiver for Georgia. He kind of really hasn't showed up for the most part. But I give the edge to the Georgia receivers, and I'll lump in the tight end room with that as well. It seems like Lawson Lucky has solidified himself as the leader of that group. Many thought it would be Oscar Dell, but it seems like Georgia has chosen to go with Lucky in that role. And then when you look at the Georgia running back room, while they aren't as good as they have been in years past, it does seem like Georgia has found something in Trevor Etienne. He may be out there for 80% of the plays as running back. I mean, which is that has not been the case for Georgia in years past. I think until they get Roderick Robinson back, it's gonna be Trevor Etienne. Now Nate Frazier came in when Brandon Robinson or Branson Robinson, excuse me, went down last week against Mississippi State. And I thought Nate Frazier looked very explosive, looked very good, but he's a true freshman. Georgia is not going to want to keep him in the football game. He still struggles with pass protection. It's tough to put him out there and feel comfortable with him not to put the ball on the ground and to pick up blocks where he needs to. So to me, I think Trevor Etienne is your guy, but I give the advantage to the linebackers for Texas because Anthony Hill is an absolute stud. They've got a really good unit overall, including the outside linebackers. I think that Texas has a clear advantage there. So I think Texas really on defense against Georgia probably wins that matchup overall. But it's about the matchups, right? If Georgia and maybe Georgia has been playing. You kind of led the beginning of the segment off, or maybe it was in our top 25. But you were talking about how much Georgia has had to pass the football as of late. Maybe they're preparing. Maybe they've been preparing for a Texas matchup that they knew they would have to rely on the passing game. Maybe they wanted to get Carson Beck some reps, kind of, get him going a little bit more than they have in the past. And it sets up nicely for this game against Texas to where maybe they have something that they can exploit. For Texas's offense versus Georgia's defense, I mentioned Texas's O-line has an advantage against the D-line. I think that Georgia's linebackers has a clear advantage over the running backs for Texas. This is another room that's been depleted, although Weisner has been playing great. I think Jaden Blue, if he's healthy, he's really, really good and really dynamic. He's been a little bit banged up as well. I like the freshman, Jarrett Gibson. He's playing really well as a true freshman, kind of, similar to Nate Frazier, I would say, as far as his explosivity and whatnot. I think he's an outstanding back. But Georgia's linebackers are legit. I mean, they've got, I think, 4 5-stars in that linebacking unit that play. That's not including I think they had 2 linebackers that came in as 5-stars that are true freshmen that don't really get a ton of playing time. But Georgia's linebackers are absolutely phenomenal. They fly around the football. But as good as they are, if Texas is able to get the edge on Georgia, which a lot of teams have been able to do running the football, then they're going to have some explosive plays for Georgia or for Texas in the running game here. And it doesn't matter how good the linebackers are. If you got a running back speed versus a linebacker speed, which may be comparable, if they get the edge, they're getting 4 yards plus. So as good as the linebackers are, they're not going to go out there and win the football game, or anything like that. So to me, I think that the D line for Georgia has to step up. They got to find ways to win against a tough offensive line if they're going to keep Texas from running the football, which as good as Texas is at passing the football, you got to take something away. So might as well be the running game, and then trust your DBs, which is a growing unit, I would say, against these wide receivers, which are very, very good for Texas. It's a clear advantage that Texas has in their wide receivers going against Georgia's DBs. Although Georgia's DBs are very talented, they have not necessarily clicked and played cohesively as a unit so far this year. So, everybody's got to step up on the defense for Georgia. I give the edge to Texas on the offensive side of the football versus Georgia's defense as well. So, on paper, it does seem like Texas should win this football game. I'm going to take a breath, let you talk for a minute, and then I'll give you my prediction so far, at least on a Sunday afternoon.
Well, I'm going to hold off on even giving my prediction today because I gotta sleep on this one a little bit more. But obviously, right now I'm leaning Texas. If you can't tell by the way I'm talking, Georgia's got some issues that they're working out. Georgia's played a way harder schedule than Texas has so far this season. That's no secret, and I think that's part of the reason that we've seen more cracks in the foundation for Georgia. And so you got to be careful not to overreact to what we've seen from Georgia or overreact to what we've seen from Texas, because all those games earlier in the season are going to make a hill of beans for this coming up Saturday. And I think it all comes down to Texas, their ability to be able to run the football in this game. I think you nailed it. That is what I'm focused on in this football game. I think Mykel Williams coming back for Georgia is going to help on the edges. I think. I don't know. I don't know. We've barely seen him this season. I think he's going to be able to help with the edges a little bit, contain some things. And Georgia, the plays that they gave up against Mississippi State were plays where Georgia had no safety help and decided, all right, we're just going to go man press right here on the line. Let's go. Let's do it. And it was the same guy that beat our secondary multiple times. I feel like Georgia was working on stuff this past weekend. It really did seem like it. It seemed like it on the sideline. There was people getting talking tos from Kirby Smart that don't typically get talking tos. Kirby's gearing up for this game. I love Georgia whenever they're an underdog. That's really when I like to get behind Georgia. This front runner stuff, it's hard to be the front runner all the time. It really is, even though Georgia's done a great job at it over the last few years. Right now, I give the edge to Texas. I will say this. Texas hasn't been great kicking field goals this season. And I'm just going to throw that out there. 2 for 4 on field goals from 40 to 50 yards. That's 50% in my book, my Georgia public education there. And look, when you're talking about a game like this, that's a 3.5-point spread, a couple of missed field goals can make the difference in this football game. Georgia hasn't missed a field goal yet this year. Georgia's been pretty good at defending kickoffs. I think Texas has too. I'm going to dig more into the special teams aspect of things as the week kind of goes on. But I feel like that is something to note. Burt Auburn has missed a couple there from the 40 to 50 yard range. His career or his long this season's like 45 yards. So take that for what it's worth. A field goal can be a big difference in this football game, especially when you're talking about the spread being 3.5. Can Georgia stop the run? That's the biggest question for me in this matchup. You got anything else on this one? And first of all, or last of all, we're going to talk more about this game on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. It's a call-in show. Call in. Come on and call in. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to hear from Texas fans, Georgia fans, who's feeling good, who's not feeling good about this football game. We'd love to hear from you all at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday night. You got anything else on this one, Mason, before we move to the next big game?
Well, I guess you're right. We're not supposed to give predictions at this point.
I mean, you can give us your lean. Let's just don't. I just don't want
oh yeah,
anybody
I
to think
mean,
we're tied to this right now. We're not tied to
no,
this prediction.
no. Y'all will have to come back on Tuesday and catch our prediction show. We'll give you our predictions. There's look, this game is going to play out very similar. I think the line is even the same as it was with Oregon and Ohio State. This is going to be a very good game. I do think that it's going to come down to who has the ball last, who plays well on special teams, who plays well on fourth down. There's going to be a lot of pieces, sort of ancillary pieces to the game that affect the football game. And I think that the winner is going to win those moments. So when it comes down to that, there's just no telling how this game's gonna play out. I'll say that, but I definitely think Texas on paper, matchup wise and everything, that they win, at least on paper right now, and I'm definitely leaning towards Texas, which stinks, as a Georgia fan to say, but I feel like they've got a lot of momentum right now, and this game's being played in Austin. It'll be one of the biggest games in Austin, in recent memory, and I think that crowd is going to have an impact on the game for
Mm-hmm.
sure. So yeah, I like Texas in this matchup right now.